I absolutely love Watchmen. It is the greatest comic ever made, the greatest superhero story ever told. And I also hate Zack Snyder. I think he doesn't know what a character is and is bad at making movies.
Why did you say that name?
But oddly, Zack Snyder is the one who directed the Watchmen movie adaptation, adapted it in a way I've never seen anything adapted before, and that results in a very strange movie, and one that it's hard not to have complicated feelings about. In order to compare the two, I'm going to have to do a bit of a deep dive on Watchmen, but I'll try to avoid a history lesson and say instead what makes it so special and what it's trying to do, so that we can then see what Zack Snyder thinks it's trying to do. Watchmen the comic started in 1986 and ended in 1987. By Alan Moore, the undisputed GOAT of comics writers, and Dave Gibbons, a phenomenal artist, Watchmen was one of the earliest examples of taking the superhero genre seriously, a true deconstruction of both its conventions and comic books as an art form. What would a person really be like who had extremely rigid black and white morality, psychological trauma from a young age, and who spends his nights as a costume vigilante? Well, that would probably be a very insane and mentally ill individual. So you have Rorschach, as capable as any superhero you've seen before, but whose personality is trying to reflect what an actual person like this would be, whose obsessive experience with vigilantism is unglamorous and terrifying. What would a godlike, altruistic human being be like? Well, to be both a god and a human being would be an arrogant, lonely life, one that could barely be understood by a normal person. So you have the uncaring, oddly depressed Dr. Manhattan, constantly walking a tightrope between people and something incomprehensible. These are more than commentaries, though. These are somehow at once recognizable archetypes and wholly new creative triumphs. And every character, every single one, is a remix on a trope, an idea clearly ruminated on until it fit into this story perfectly. And Watchmen extends that deconstruction past its characters and into its world. How would the existence of these things affect politics? How does history bend because of them? What would have happened in Vietnam had Dr. Manhattan existed? How would the Cold War change? How would the public react to their presence? What controversies would arise? What would happen to a superhero in old age, in middle age, in retirement? Superheroes never really hurt anyone, no one ever bleeds. But what would it be like in a world with real danger? A world with sex and violence, where crime is a serious thing? What would it be like in our world? In how many directions can this genre be pushed? How completely and totally realistically can we paint this while still retaining its status as superhero fiction? What these guys did with just raw fucking talent is create the greatest superhero comic ever made, probably the best comic ever made. The industry, though, took all the wrong lessons from Watchmen and its contemporaries like The Dark Knight Returns. The idea being that what people must have liked about Watchmen was its violence, people dying and swearing. Where things needed to go, apparently, was towards darkness and grit. Not in a more serious direction, but ironically a more juvenile one. It might be true that audiences wanted that. I don't know, I wasn't there. But those things are not what made Watchmen great. And the things that did, serious actual writing, a willingness to treat the characters in your stories like people, the plot like it's something that really matters, to push yourself and your audience, those things rarely continued. What we got were anti-heroes, pouches, guns, murder, and sex, with total emptiness behind them. And that stuff did sell well, so I guess that is what some people wanted. And unfortunately, Zack Snyder was one of those people. So let's talk about Zack Snyder for a minute. As a director, I think Snyder has literally one single thing going for him, and that is a distinct visual style. A want to make things look cool. I think he's made exactly 2 good movies in his life, and the rest are probably some of the worst movies I have ever seen. He's probably a very nice guy, but when it comes to making art or even just telling any sort of story, he's just untalented. Somehow, this is the guy who directed Watchmen. One of the weird things about the movie is that in a lot of places it's adapted with total fealty to the comic. Dialogue is kept exact, and a lot of the time, the copied dialogue doesn't work in the new medium.
Beneath me, this awful city. It screams like an abattoir full of retarded children.
The scenes are clearly trying to exactly ape the panels, but sometimes entire scenes are cut, characters are shuffled around, dialogue is removed in ways that are frankly idiotic. Like take this. So like this panel says, I am standing on a fire escape in 1945, reaching out to stop my father, take the cogs and flywheels from him, piece them all together again. But it's too late. Always has been, always will be, too late. What it's saying is due to the nature of reality and causality, things that happen were always destined to happen, they always would have happened that way, and there's nothing you could have done to change it. Free will is a lie, history is unchangeable. But he cuts the setup of that line, and as a result, it's nonsensical.
Perhaps the world is not made. Perhaps nothing is made. A clock without a craftsman. It's too late. Always has been. Always will be. Too late.
What's too late? He cut out the thing that it's too late to change. The direction and pacing also really bother me. Zack Snyder is totally in love with super slow motion, but it's like he doesn't know how to read a comic. In a comic, panels imply how long the time between them is. A great one can do that unambiguously. But Snyder acts like he had no idea how long he was supposed to linger on each moment. Look how long it takes at the beginning for the comedian to fall and the button to stop spinning.
Unforgettable too.
Compared to 4 panels in the original story. And look at how much fucking slow-mo is in this movie. It's obnoxious, it's constant. I think it's supposed to be showing reverence, but it just comes off like a visual effects sizzle reel. Snyder's misunderstandings of the goals of Watchmen are also hilariously evident just by looking at it. Why is this movie basically colorless? There's like a goth black and white filter over everything, with really, really deep shadows, as if to yell in your face, this is a dark story. It's so fucking dark and gritty and cool and dark. The comic has a very deliberate use of color, yellows, reds, blues, pinks, that influence the moods of scenes with intention. In this movie, everything looks exactly the same. Dr. Manhattan is the only thing you can make out as different, glowing blue in a constant oceans of black. The blood also is this very strange, not at all human looking color. Like there's so much of it, and it's so deep, that it too is basically black. It's so odd, isn't it? The visuals are adapted literally, but the visuals are inconsistent anyway. It all gives the sense that the philosophy of the comic of superheroes as real, tangible people is being completely tossed. They snap, maim, and kill with a hyper-violence that implies superhumanity. There's this bombast, this grandiosity, that is specifically, purposefully omitted from the comic. Remember, the characters in the comic are superheroes, they're very eccentric and fun creations, but the goal was not, let's create some cool stuff and bash them together like action figures. It was, what do characters like this look like in our world? The film isn't interested. The score is okay, again, it's often more grandiose than it should be. But the soundtrack is really fucking weird.
What do you expect? The comedian's dead.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
It honestly makes scenes comedic, just showing further that this movie doesn't know what it's doing. My Chemical Romance plays over the credits.
Rorschach's Journal, October 12th, 1985. Tonight, a comedian died in New York.
Rorschach, the violent, pitiable psycho from the comic, becomes an actual action hero in the adaptation, since it doesn't seem to judge him the same way. His unique brand of disgusting violence is everywhere now. It lingers always, again seeming to say, look how violent this is. Doesn't that make it cool and serious? The acting, I will say, is for the most part great, but unfortunately, Silk Spectre's character is botched pretty bad. An accomplished, independent, and modern woman with a sharp wit becomes eye candy, with an actress clearly picked for their looks over ability.
John thinks, unless he can do something about it, that there's gonna be nuclear war.
There was no respect at all for this character. But I think of all the things this movie gets wrong, and there are a fuckload of them, the thing that bothers me the most is the ending. Not the literal plot changes, those I think are in some sense necessary for this movie to be made at all. The comic ending requires quite a lot of setup, and the movie is already more than 3 hours long. Although if you cut most of this stupid slow motion, I bet the runtime shrinks by a fucking third. But no, that's not my issue. In the comic, the ending is very effective, because Alan Moore knows what kind of story you think this is. Our heroes are converging on the villain's hideout. They've discovered that a member of their team, Adrian Veidt, also known as Ozymandias, is the ultimate architect of a master plan. For all the deconstruction going on, for how special this has been, this is still a superhero story, so we have a pretty good idea where it's going. But when Rorschach and Night Owl confront him, no fight really happens. Ozymandias defeats them easily, his face never straining, as they accuse him of being behind everything. He freely begins to explain his plan, going over the intricacies of his political philosophy, of the issue of global nuclear war, of the plot details of the story we've been reading from the other side, from his perspective. All mysteries fall into place. But his face is bored looking. His implied tone feels stoic and detached. As he speaks, the pages are intercut with scenes of some New Yorkers the story's been following as they group up as well. And the sense is that we're building towards something, but we still have no idea what. Adrian explains his plan. To prevent the inevitable nuclear devastation a Cold War will cause, he will trick the Earth into believing it's been invaded by aliens, destroying half of New York and killing millions of people. In his belief, this will lead to global peace and cooperation against this fake alien threat. As Adrian finishes explaining, Night Owl laughs, and in a casual, conversational tone, points out the insanity and ridiculousness of that plan. Obviously, Adrian, you need help, he says. When was this hopeless black fantasy supposed to happen? When were you planning to do it? Veidt's next words live in comic infamy. Do it? Dan, I'm not a Republic serial villain. Do you seriously think I'd explain my master stroke if there remained even the slightest chance of you affecting its outcome? I did it 35 minutes ago. I don't know if it comes across in video form, but the shocked silence afterwards is palpable, even though no sound reaches your ears while reading. It is one of the most intense and potent moments in the comics medium. And outside of the plot significance, it says this isn't the story that you thought it was. This isn't a supervillain the way that you know one. This is one that fights your heroes easily, explains the plot in a bored, persuasive tone with a dense amount of dialogue, and wins. And after that moment, as the world renounces war and Adrian's crazy plan works, the story becomes a moral interrogation of what to do now. But even though it seems to have worked, as peace on Earth arrives and the story winds down, Adrian asks Dr. Manhattan, I did the right thing, didn't I? It all worked out in the end? In the end? Nothing ends, Adrian. Nothing ever ends. But in the movie, the ending retains absolutely nothing, except I did it 35 minutes ago. This time, it is a fight. It's a scene with constant action and choreography. In a way that is now meant to feel like the climax of a superhero film. Adrian still wins, but the music is big. The direction is clearly focusing on action in this good versus evil moment. Look how high that jump is. What the fuck? Adrian is monologuing, not in the detached, odd way of the comic, but with a sinister, villainous cadence that seems to misunderstand what it's building towards.
You're a bullshit assassin. You paid him to throw us off.
Mr. Chess gave his life in the service of a higher cause, Dan.
The expansive explanation is gone, traded in for snappy lines that imply he is a bog-standard antagonist. The lofty intelligence is nowhere.
So in order to save this planet, I had to trick it. For the greatest practical joke in human history.
Instead of Night Owl casually reacting to what Ozymandias is telling him, disbelieving his ridiculous plan, we get Rorschach, who just says,
No, we can't let you do that.
and then the line is delivered.
Do that, Rorschach? I'm not a comic book villain. Do you seriously think I'd explain my masterstroke to you if there were even the slightest possibility you could affect the outcome? I triggered it 35 minutes ago.
And yeah, the plot beat is the same. It's a beat that inherently drops your jaw, but it's flatter, isn't it? The importance is somehow drained out of it. It's just a line from a movie. It even loses that moment of silence afterward to let the moment sit and sink. Why do they look at each other like a comedy duo? Why does it cut straight to a bunch of computers with big music? And then, after another change that I don't really want to get into right now, Night Owl beats up Adrian and admonishes him.
You haven't idealized mankind, but you've deformed it. You've mutilated it. That's your legacy.
It betrays the deeply uncomfortable philosophical idea that peace may have been worth the act, that this is too big of a question for a middle-aged guy in an owl suit, that in that moment of horror, he just searches for connection with Laurie rather than confront it. Snyder cuts the Manhattan-Adrian interaction entirely. Instead, at the end of the film, we get this.
Are we gonna be all right?
As long as people think John's still watching us, we'll be all right. In the end.
I know what John would say. Nothing ends. Nothing ever ends.
In the original story, it's supposed to undercut the idea that the genocide had been worth it, that you may have ended war for now, but it's not going to be over forever. Here, it's what, like an add-on to some romantic coda at the end? We have, did I do the right thing killing half of New York and millions of people versus, hey, you think me and you are going to be alright? The original meaning is so far drained out of the line that I don't understand why it's still even here. Again, it just tells me Zack Snyder didn't get why it was there in the first place.
There's gonna be nuclear war.
If you've only seen the movie and never read Watchmen, please read it. I'm begging you to read it. But if you've already read Watchmen, I actually recommend you do watch this movie. I'm not going to beg you, it's definitely not good, but it's such an interesting example of something special just going straight over the head of the person who adapted it. Just whiffing in so many places. But he adapted so rigidly and just swung so fucking hard at the ball that it's actually worth something anyway.
Rorschach's Journal, October 12th, 1985. Tonight, a comedian died in New York.